I'm going to go ahead and get started because we have wonderful speakers today and want to make sure we get through all of our questions. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Taylor Maag. I am the Director of Workforce Development Policy for PPI. PPI is a national nonprofit that works to develop bold yet pragmatic solutions for America's most pressing challenges. As part of the PPI team, I lead our workforce portfolio and the New Skills for a New Economy project. Today's event is the first webinar for the project, so we're very excited, and is co-sponsored by PPI's Reinventing America's Schools project, which pushes for innovation and reform in K-12, as well as the 74. I'm going to provide a bit of background on the conversation today before doing a quick poll for our audience members, then introducing our speakers, and then we'll dive in to a wonderful Q&A today. So like I mentioned, the New Skills for New Economy project seeks to promote workforce development policies that level the playing field for degree and non-degree workers, ensuring the majority of Americans who don't have college degrees have avenues for upward mobility. A huge priority for this project is not just developing policies to support those already working, but to prepare young people for career success, offering high quality career learning opportunities earlier and more often. I think as we all know, this work comes at a very critical time as our economy is continuing to change with jobs of the future requiring new skills and ways of work. And simultaneously, young people and their families are rethinking traditional post-secondary options like college due to issues of affordability and alignment to career opportunities. In a new survey released Tuesday, actually, by Populous, which is a Massachusetts-based think tank focused on public engagement, their respondents, which were adults across the state, including parents, ranked preparation for college or university at the bottom of their priorities for schools, ranking 47th out of 57th overall, while being prepared for a career jumped from 27th to 6th overall. And that just shows, I think, the stark transition we're in right now with priorities of our K-12 system. Additionally, a recent report from the Georgetown Center on Education and Workforce found that young people today are facing a very different world than the generation before, where it takes longer to get a good job, and where limited access to work-based learning and career counseling impede progress towards these opportunities. I think this information just shows it's clear college alone can't be the only option for our high school students, and we must develop alternative options starting in K-12 that yield strong returns for America's young people. So with that framing, before introducing our esteemed speakers, we're going to do a quick poll for the audience. So I'm just going to pause here and let our tech wizards behind. Perfect, put it up. So which group do you most identify with? So we can know who's in our audience today. Awesome, and as that's up, I'm just gonna keep going and introduce our speakers. Appreciate you all for participating in that. I just wanna say that I'm really excited not only for the conversation today, it comes at a critical time, but this webinar presents an opportunity to engage with stakeholders who are at the forefront of policy and practice in this space, working to expand youth career development opportunities through career pathway approaches, youth apprenticeships, and other innovations. So with that, I'd love to introduce our wonderful speakers. We have the Honorable Jim Rosapepe, State Senator from Maryland, representing District 21 in Prince George's and Anne Arundel counties. Hey, Jim, thanks for being here today.
Happy to.
We have Don Fraser, the Chief Program Officer for the Education Design Lab. Hi, Don.
Hi, Taylor. Thanks for having me.
And then last but not least, of course, we have Lateefah Durant, who's the Vice President of Innovation for Cityworks DC. And Lateefah left an important meeting today to be here with us. So again, thanks, Lateefah. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Taylor, for the invitation. Excited to be here.
Great. So with that, we'll post our survey results and then we will start Q&A. Awesome. So we have some parents, a lot of educators, funders, journalists, a lot of advocates with us today, which is exciting, and some policymakers. So a really great diverse group. We're excited to have you all and welcome. Great. First question for you all. With that introduction, as we all can agree on, we need to expand career learning opportunities for young people. Given you a big question to start, so apologies, but excited for your responses. Can you all expand on the efforts you are championing to ensure these opportunities exist for young people? Have these efforts helped shift mindsets in your communities, the communities you are working in? And what solutions do you see having the most promise and impact in the future? Senator Rosapepe, I'm going to pass to you first to kick us off.
Thank you. Well, in Maryland, we made a very serious funded commitment to vast expansion of registered apprenticeships starting in high school. We passed a law 2 years ago that sets the goal by 2031 that 45% of our high school graduates will have completed the high school level of a registered apprenticeship. That means we need to go from about 12,500 apprentices right now in the state to something more like 30 or 35,000. In addition, we have a work group that is being put together called Apprenticeship 2030, which is to look beyond the high school level of apprenticeships to folks who join apprenticeships later. And there we want to get Maryland to the penetration rate of apprenticeships that they have in the UK, in Canada, and in Australia. And that would take us to about 70,000 apprentices. Very broad, deep policy commitment to this stuff. Apropos of your point about folks getting degrees and not getting degrees, our education study that recommended this law found that only 1/3 of Maryland high school graduates earn any degree by the age of 25. 2/3 earn no degree by the age of 25. But Maryland historically puts $2 billion a year into degree institutions and less than $100 million into everything else. So we're spending $2 billion on 1/3, and we're spending less than $100 million on 2/3. No wonder we have a skills mismatch. Finally, we inaugurated a new governor in Maryland yesterday, and I'm just going to quote from his inaugural address. "We must end the myth that young people must attend college to be successful." So he's a big advocate of apprenticeships. We've done a lot already, but we're going to do a lot more.
Jim, that's great. And I love your just like breakdown of the cost differentiation, because I think that spending is a huge piece of this puzzle. So appreciate that call out, and I'm very excited for Governor Moore to get started. Awesome. Lateefah, I'll pass to you next.
Yeah, so it's interesting, particularly in light of what Jim just shared, that traditionally we've treated career development as something that starts in college. You work with your college university's career services to ensure or secure an internship or a job. And while those services are great, at Cityworks DC, we're working to ensure that young people have access to career opportunities starting in high school. Through our CareerWise DC Youth Apprenticeship Program, high school students in their junior and senior year are beginning to develop their careers in IT, business operations, and finance. And so for 2 or 3 years, these high school students get to develop the skills and competencies needed to be software developers, HR specialists, financial analysts. And while in high school, these students are working for Fortune 100 companies like Accenture and Freddie Mac, as well as your small local minority-owned businesses. And so when that college student is, just getting to career services for the first time to get their first professional job, our youth apprentices already have 3 years of experience under their belts. And so, while youth apprenticeship is a promising practice for launching young people into careers that provide those family-sustaining wages, admittedly, getting others to buy into this work is not without, challenges. For our CareerWise Youth Apprenticeship Program to really maximize its full potential, it requires that the world in which our young people exist, that world changes. So companies have to change their mindset about age and degree requirements. Schools and parents also have to shift mindsets from, one path to success, that being college, to a belief that there are multiple paths to success and that youth apprenticeship is one of them. State and local government agencies, they have to shift. They have to shift the focus from seat time to mastering competencies and increasing school schedule flexibility so that our young people really have the opportunity to build their careers. And so what I love about Cityworks DC is not only do we provide youth with opportunity, is that we're also working to create the ecosystem in which our programs can thrive. So we've worked to change mindsets by having a group of over a dozen government, school, and business leaders participate in a 6-month institute to learn about the Swiss system of apprenticeship. Jim was talking about the apprenticeship model in Australia and Britain, and we've been studying Switzerland. And we're continuing to convene those city leaders for over 2 years, to really grapple with the hard work of creating a local talent pipeline that starts in high school. We've partnered with business associations like the Federal City Council and the Chamber to help companies figure out how to make good on all these DE promises they made in the wake of George Floyd. And we also work with our local school partners to figure out how we can open up student schedules by having certain courses count for multiple requirements, how we can redesign the school schedule, how we've led professional development for school counselors and college counselors on the importance and on the impact that youth employment and career development can have for young people. You know, in Washington, DC, you know, our nation's capital, the net worth of a white family is 81 times that of a Black family, 81 times. You know, youth apprenticeship really can help to close that wealth gap in our city by providing young people with a robust pathway to high wage, high demand careers in DC, in the DMV, and in a way that doesn't require them to take on a ton of debt. It doesn't require that they delay earning money, and it doesn't require them having to forgo building their career while they're in school or while they're getting training.
Thank you, Lateefah. I just want to call out, I love, number one, the commitment to equity that you're thinking about and how we can close some of these economic mobility gaps that we're seeing not only in DC, but across the nation. And then I also love your point around industry and ensuring they're at the table and driving these efforts, because we know employers are critical partners to designing these types of programs for young people. So appreciate that. All right, Don, we'll wrap up this question with you.
Great, thanks, Taylor. And tough to pull up the rear when you all have made so many great points already. But I'm going to first start by talking about what it is that we're actually championing. What we're championing at Education Design Lab is accelerating the shift to a skills-based economy. You hear that, people might ask, what does that even mean? Right? And from our perspective, there are a few layers. I want to talk about those. First, skills are the new currency. When I say skills, I mean technical skills, I mean human durable skills. People sometimes refer to them as soft skills. I hear that. I gray even more than I currently am on the face because I have no hair. But I'm talking about skills like collaboration, creative problem solving, empathy. Second, employers today are just more interested in knowing what skills you have than how you acquired them. And skills and your ability to refresh your skills or gain new ones matters more than ever, especially in this rapidly changing global economy. The third layer here is your ability to make your skills visible so that employers can recognize and appreciate your capabilities. That is more important than ever. And that's a hard one, right? I mean, we're spending a lot of time on this at the lab, talking about how to bring skills to the forefront. A lot of the folks that we talk about, the learners we care about, they have skills that they don't even recognize as skills. Those are just the way they lead their life. And we need to actually say to them and help them understand those skills have tremendous value, but we have to find ways to ensure that employers can see those skills, because if they did, they will say those are valuable in the workplace. So our one area of focus, different from apprenticeships, another kind of sector that I want to talk about is community colleges. They have really been interested and I think very instrumental in this shift that I'm talking about. We're seeing potential for them to be at the center of a really dynamic learn and earn system that allows all young people, no matter where you come from, to access and participate in learning or training that's not just well aligned to industry needs. I think that's something everybody seems to be in agreement about, but that also helps youth understand and make visible the skills they already have and the skills needed for jobs in high growth industries. Historically, we've just not done a great job of helping articulate that and showing them. So if we can't do that, then how are we going to get to alignment? In some ways, I do believe that higher education and the world of work are already there, right, in this new skills-based economy. We're seeing change in language that they're using. We're seeing change in some of the behaviors. Employers are shifting to skills-based hiring or trying to. Colleges are breaking down learning into component parts, designing micro-credentials that align to workforce needs. But the whole system, the entire ecosystem, groups on both supply and demand sides need to get there. We need workforce investment boards, we need chambers, we need libraries, we need community partners, all to get there. And we need youth at the end of the day to get there, which means they have to understand what it means to participate in a skills-based economy, why their skills and their ability to talk about their skills is so important, how they're already developing and practicing skills that are valued by employers. You know, a lot of what you're mentioning, Lateefah, you know, around counseling and we were talking before the webinar started. Absolutely. Like, how do we help these folks really elevate and understand, you know, the world in which they're now living? A focus on enhanced career learning opportunities and a new narrative that is associated with career and tech ed. I think it's, you know, obviously really important, but it's not sufficient. We really have to move minds around the value of career learning opportunities, the value of career and technical education in ways we just haven't done before. We've been trying. There's no doubt about that, but we have to change what I refer to as the kitchen table conversation so that families recognize why they must participate in a skills-based economy and how they can do that. And by the way, you know, we've done this pretty successfully before when you think about college access, right? We helped families and learners shed the notion that college wasn't for them, that they couldn't go. We got them excited about going to college. And the college access movement showed us that we, you know, by engaging in a really comprehensive and sustained investment, we can change the narrative of this works. And yeah, we made mistakes, but we can learn from them. We should learn from them, and we can apply them to this space.
Dawn, that's great. And I love just the changing minds piece you said. And someone actually wrote me a question on, is this just happening in high schools, or is this a broader K-12 conversation in middle school? And I think that goes back to your point of like the holistic need to ensure all partners in this area are at the table so we can expand these conversations earlier and more often, so we can change minds and people are more comfortable with alternative pathways to college, knowing that they exist and they're high quality in their community. So I think that's just a really great point, and excited to kind of go further with you all with some more specific questions based on your work. So my next question is for Lateefah. Lateefah, you were, you know, so eloquently put how much you've been working to expand career learning and experiences in DC, but you've also been doing this across the DMV for some time, and previously have worked in PG County leading career and technical education. Can you talk about your experience in your previous and current roles to expand youth apprenticeship opportunities in the communities you worked? Aside from the skill development piece, which I know you started to talk about, what are other critical strategies to ensure young people understand these opportunities are available to them and also then are prepared for the careers that they need to upon graduation?
Certainly, Taylor. So prior to joining Cityworks DC about 3 years ago, I did hold various leadership roles in career and college readiness for Prince George's County Public Schools. That district has over 130,000 students, about 40,000 or so of whom are high school students. And so with support from leaders such as Senator Rosapepe, we were able to launch a school to apprenticeship program. And so the school district maintains over 200 buildings and employs a significant number of staff to maintain those buildings. So we were able to get young people from our CTE program, so electrical, HVAC, plumbing, carpentry, masonry, hired as apprentices. And these apprentices worked in their 12th grade year throughout the school year. And upon graduation, they can be hired as full-time school system staff, 18-year-old, full benefits, healthcare, pension, paid leave. And, you know, the training that they've received is also recognized by local industry. So again, it gave them options about whether to continue with the district or whether they wanted to seek employment elsewhere. And during National Apprenticeship Week, just this past November, I was really fortunate. I was able to have apprentices from both PGCPS and CareerWise DC on stage presenting together about the power of youth apprenticeship. Particularly, this was at the Partnership for Advancing Youth Apprenticeship Summit. And these two women of color, Stephanie and Leah, are operating in male-dominated fields of carpentry and finance. And I'm telling you, they are a force to be reckoned with. And they were able to speak confidently about the skills and the competencies they've earned, going to Don's point about shifting the conversation to skills and competency-based and how to help our young people communicate what they've learned and be able to demonstrate what they're able to do. And these two ladies were able to do that in front of a room full of people. They were a force to be reckoned with. And They also talked about their plans for the future, which was business ownership, which is fantastic. But I really feel like a critical component of the success of the youth apprenticeship programs is really career coaching and mentoring that they receive from the program managers as well as their colleagues and supervisors. Unfortunately, young people that, aren't tied to an employer with a focus on career development, or they're not enrolled at a university with a robust career development system, they don't get the coaching that they need to launch their careers. And that's why Cityworks DC, we started a program right at the beginning of the pandemic called Embark. We realized that so many young people, they'll be graduating from high school without a safety net. And so we wanted to be there to support them. And so Embark is a career coaching and professional development program helping DC residents to identify and achieve their career, their education, and their training goals that's going to build the foundation for their future. All of our Embark staff, they've completed life coaching certification, myself included, including a specialization in youth resilience. And so as a result, our young adults in DC are receiving the type of executive coaching you or I would pay $200 or $300 an hour for. And it's having results. At the end of this 10-month career coaching program, the participants have earned industry credentials, they've increased their hourly wages, they've enrolled or persisted in college. And so I feel like what makes apprenticeship and career coaching so valuable for young people in launching their careers is that it provides what we at Cityworks DC affectionately call the social mobility trifecta, which is the industry value credentials, the relevant paid work experience, and the social capital to compete for and secure the top jobs in the region. A year and a half ago, we partnered with City Bridge Education and Bain & Company to survey over 1,200 alumni of DC public charter, and adult public charter schools. And this was an early career outcomes project. And it had 3 key findings that I think are really important to our work of youth career development. First, we learned, which I think we already knew, that a bachelor's degree is not a guarantee. The data showed that even those that complete their BA are undermatched in their employment. They're often working jobs that don't even require a bachelor's degree. Second, alumni can really be successful on other post-secondary pathways. And so instead of a BA, these alumni had industry certifications or other associate's degrees, to Don's point, and they were making on par with graduates that had bachelor's degrees, about $41,000 a year or so. And then I would say third, I think what was most telling is that career assets are valuable for all young people. So young adults with these career assets earn 10% more than their peers. So both those with a BA and those with an alternative post-secondary pathway earn more if they had a certain, what we call backpack of career assets. And so the career assets that we found that made the most difference: work experience, internships, apprenticeships that were aligned to their career aspiration, career exposure, and career counseling. And so what excites me about these assets, this backpack for young people, is that these are things that we can impact. And they're precisely the areas that our programs are focused on at Cityworks DC. Our CareerWise DC Youth Apprenticeship Program is providing career exposure and counseling and work experience. And our Embark program is providing career coaching and professional development for young people 18 to 24. And we also provide direct services to employers to ensure that their early career employees are successful at work, in school, and in life. We're really committed to ensuring that young people in our city have a strong start. We want them to have a strong occupational skill set. We want them to have a strong understanding and sense of themselves. We want them to have a strong professional network. And together, it provides a strong foundation that they can then launch their careers.
Lateefah, that was wonderful. And I'm just so impressed too with the work you did, not only work you're doing in DC, but what you did previously. And I know Senator Rosapepe has praised your work in his counties that he represents. I just want to add something. I think you said something really well. And I think we got a few questions in the chat of like, we're talking a lot today about career pathway development, but college is also a viable option. And often we are talking about them in silos, but they're not silos. They can be both. And right, you can start out in a youth apprenticeship or career program and then transfer or leverage the skills you have if you would like to continue your educational journey to post-secondary education. And so I just want to flag that I appreciated those comments, and yes to everything people were saying, that it should not be, separate. But right now, I think we do see less of kind of commitment to a lot of the career pathway growth. So it's really exciting to see some of these efforts like you're doing, Lateefah, that's not only building those opportunities, but connecting them back to college if that's right for the individual.
And I think what's interesting, one of the programs that I didn't talk about necessarily directly is our partnership with Aon Corporation. Aon is a large multinational insurance company, and they've hired apprentices, and we're supporting their DC-based apprentices. Those apprentices are getting their associate's degree from the community college, to Don's point, in business and with a specialization in insurance. And so they figured out a way to build their schedules where they're getting paid full-time for work with all the benefits, and they're carving out time for them to actually work on their associate's degree and go to class. So at the end of the 2-year experience, they have their associate's degree and they have 2 years at Aon under their belt, and they're ready to be hired full-time as an employee after the apprenticeship into existing roles at the corporation. And so I think we're seeing more and more of these earn and learn models, that it really isn't, while we're talking about apprenticeship, I think with people, and we're emphasizing the career aspect, there's also the educational aspect. It's a dual education system. It's not education or work. It's both working and getting your education at the same time.
And Jim, I think you were trying to get into, so I want to pass to you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but I think context is important here too. The overwhelming jobs in the American economy do not require college degrees. That's why we can have 1/3 of our only 1/3 of our high school graduates getting degrees by the age of 25. The only place that really require degrees is where it's a regulatory requirement. So to be a teacher, the regulatory system says you have to get this kind of degree training. If you want to be a nurse, like to be a registered nurse, you have to get at least an AA degree. But most jobs, including most professional jobs, think of everything in sales, think of everything in IT. There really are not degree requirements. Some employers may put in degree and by mistake, because the HR department doesn't want to sift through so many resumes. It goes to Don's point about how you get visibility on people's skills as opposed to their degrees. So traditionally, HR departments say, I'll only look at people who have this degree. And they're screening out 2/3 of the labor pool, which is why the employers have a problem. That's point number one. Point number two is, for those narrow areas that do require degrees, what they do in the UK, Australia, other countries, is they have degree apprenticeships. And we literally right now in Maryland are looking what Alabama passed last year, degree nursing apprenticeship program. There are teacher degree apprenticeship programs in other states. We're looking at that in Maryland. So I think that's the other way. If you have to get a degree, it can be integrated in the apprenticeship.
Yeah, Jim, I think that's such a good point. And I think that answers a lot of questions that are coming up in the chat. And this is a common model, and there are colleges partnering really well with industry and other public partners to make sure that these opportunities are available. So thank you both. That was really helpful. And I'm glad we're getting to answer some of the questions in the chat. Don, I'm going to pass to you next. I have a question for you, and then I'm also going to integrate some questions in the chat based on your first comment that I think, so it might be a double header here.
Okay.
Don, we did have some questions around like who's starting the skills-based hiring trend. Is it employers? Is it the supply side? Is it the demand side? Can you speak more to that? And I guess on top of that question, the official one, I just want to say that the Education Design Lab is at the forefront of innovation in our education space. So you're really working to push our secondary and post-secondary systems to be more responsive to the needs of their students and the economy, which I think is a very unique but exciting place to be. And I just wanted to ask what some of the new models, I know we've talked a lot about apprenticeship, which still is underdeveloped and we need more of, but what are some of the new models related to career development that you're trying to implement across the country? What are some of the roadblocks you're seeing there, as it not only, I know you mentioned a lot of mindset, but are there any also like policies or practice things that are getting in the way? So I know I'm giving you two at once, but
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Taylor. So the question that was asked by the audience around who started it, typically what we've seen is that when the workforce makes a decision about something, there's a trickle down effect, right? That they say we need this, and people jump, right? The providers, the folks who are working to place folks, then make some change, right? I think some of the criticism of higher ed, particularly four-year schools right now, is that they're not in line enough with what the workforce needs. And also graduates are getting jobs, right? So until like an employer essentially says to a college president, we're not going to hire your students anymore, right? I'm not sure how quickly they'll change, right? So I think a lot of what we're seeing is being driven by the demand side right now. So that's the audience question. To your question, but before I kind of dive into what it is we're doing and some of the innovation, I want to emphasize from our perspective just how important it is for us to make the types of sweeping changes that I think we're all trying to do here, particularly in the work and learning space. So why? Well, let's first recognize that this group of young people, maybe ages 14 to 29, are the largest generation in history, right? And that's global, right? Also, right? So when we think about this age group, that's important to recognize, right? We've got a lot of young folks around the world right now, and of course in our own backyard. If we don't make significant changes, our workforce, our economy are going to suffer. If we don't make significant changes, the people who are really the backbone of our workforce are going to struggle to have economic security and mobility. And that's really important for us at Education Design Lab. So let me first talk about our process, because I think it's important to understand our approach to designing new models. When I came to the lab 8 years ago, we leaned very heavily on design thinking as a methodology, as a process to help four-year colleges rapidly test ideas and to place small bets. Like, they had a lot of bureaucracy that wouldn't allow them to even launch a pilot. So we came in with, hey, we've got design thinking in this process, we're in some capacity, so we're going to help you do that. Our tagline when we launched as an organization was designing education toward the future of work. Back then it was pretty confusing. Say it now, and most people are nodding in agreement. They're saying, yeah, we have to do that, absolutely. We have always been hyper-focused on centering learners and understanding learners in depth, right? Unlocking their voices, having them at the table during the design process. Because historically, we've just gone heads down in education and say, we'll build this thing, right? And they'll participate, they'll show up for it. In some cases, they have no choice but to show up for it, right? But we have not brought them into the process of design. Over years, our process has evolved. While we still utilize design thinking, we've incorporated human-centered design. That's kind of becoming trendy. A lot more people are talking about that. We've incorporated equity-centered design. Lateefah, you talked about equity, and we have done this because we need to build scalable solutions, not just solutions that make small change, right? We have to build scalable solutions that can be truly transformative, which means you have to go very deep on your understanding to be able to test ideas. These are just long-standing, extremely complex problems and we've had historically exclusionary systems. So the work to redesign those is subsequently going to be complex and require us to think and act in ways that challenge us, right? So I first want to just kind of talk about that, right? So if that's the way we're operating, I'll get to a model now, right? An example of how this has shown up in our work. We're asking, and we're really excited about this too, we're asking the field the following question, our community college partners in particular. How might we design equitable and accessible micro pathways toward high growth careers that are endorsed by employers and visible to learners? So you already heard me talk a little bit about, if you take that apart, those different elements of that question. Why? Well, we recognize that a new class of credential is needed, right? And Senator already talked about, right, that the college degree is probably not what's needed, but something's needed, right? So something else is needed, and employers need something to grasp onto to better understand what you're bringing to the table as an individual. This new class of credential has to be better aligned to the market, aligned to specific job roles. So not just saying, yeah, this is what's happening in IT, right? Like, what about that job in IT, right? Are you aligned to that particular entry-level job, for example? They have to be designed to meet learner needs, and they have to be faster than traditional offerings, right? We cannot expect people, Lateefah mentioned this, to defer earning and living, right? So, and we saw during the pandemic just how problematic that is, right? People can't afford the time, right? So those new models of work and learn, right? And those are all helpful in that. So pathways aren't new, but micro pathways, as we're defining them, are. From our perspective, a micro pathway, it's a learning experience that's comprised of 2 or more stackable micro credentials that can be packaged, they can be validated by regional employers, local employers, and they connect learners to employment in high growth careers, as well as continuing education opportunities. So if you want to go on to that 4-year degree at some point, you can, right? Like, we're not saying that this is the path, right? We're saying we need others. So how different is this than the pathway concept, the work that's going on around the country? Well, again, we got to address affordability, flexibility, relevance, portability, and as I mentioned earlier and said a couple times, visibility. Right now, this work is happening across the country at a diverse set of community colleges in areas like allied health, information technology, advanced manufacturing, construction, automotive, renewable energy, also in business and hospitality. So this is really exciting work that's kind of catching fire in a lot of ways. And part of the reason why is because employers are playing a more central role in the development of these micro pathways. We're not going heads down as a community college, as faculty, to say, we think we know what employers need. We're saying, we're going to listen to what employers are saying they need, and we're going to repackage and rethink the learning that goes into that, right? And to make something faster means you have to take some things out, right? Because a lot of times people are paying for education that they don't actually need in that job, right? So I took 4 classes. The employer would say, you actually don't need those classes for this job. Great that you had it, right? But you don't need it for this job. So, should we still be doing that, right? Should we still be asking people to come out of pocket to pay for learning that they don't need for that job? That's a question. Now, around roadblocks, I would say the primary roadblock actually is will, right? It's not finance, right? And capacity, it's will. Are you willing to do things differently, to put in the work to transform practices? Are you willing to take what feels like a chance to partner with an entirely new organization that you never thought to partner with? Are you willing to take a hard and critical look at your own institution, your own organization, and own what's not working, right? Own who's not being served. So again, that first roadblock is will. I think the second is capacity, right? This work is complex, as I said. While we provide a significant amount of heavy lifting and thought leadership, our partners still need to put a team together, right? They still have to have a project lead. So we're providing some funding for that because they're cash strapped in a lot of ways. It's still a challenge for them with an already taxed system. But we're really focusing on also building more doers, right? Changing the mindset and the way that people in education and community colleges are actually working. We're talking about communities of practice, right? And this is also starting to be a little bit misused, unfortunately. People say communities of practice all over the place, but we're really talking about innovators who can activate one another, right? Support one another, learn from one another, and even improve on active models, right? And then try and do those things. We don't have to be the lead for all that. right? But we want to activate people in that. So we really believe very strongly that by building capacity of people in higher education, so they can think like designers, use human-centered design without being schooled in it, that they can work in ways that make them more agile and flexible. You asked, I think the last part of your question was related to reforms, and then I'm going to be quiet. So I'm just going to go back to my mindset shift for a moment. Designing and redesigning our programs and for increased agility, for increased flexibility, it just isn't enough. If I'm doing something that's physical, right, and it requires me to be more agile and flexible, but I don't have a full understanding of how increasing those things are going to benefit me, then I'm not going to be agile and flexible enough, right? So there's this layer that we're missing right now on helping people understand the why. I do love where we're headed on this front. Organizations are being more inventive. They're having conversations that they never had. They're being a little less risk averse. But we have to be willing to let go of some age-old practices that that we've really been relying on. And I think, Lateefah, you mentioned this. Like, for example, why can't employers hire people before they've earned the desired or required certification or credential? Right? We have this belief that somehow it's like, we can't bring you in the door until you actually have that, like, full amount of training, right? We're still behaving in that way. I think apprenticeships are proof that that's a way that we can do that differently. But outside of apprenticeships, we can also do that differently. We don't want to push people in on the deep end on day one. We feel like they have to be ready on day one. I'm not sure about that, right? Why can't onboarding include an investment in that individual, right, that allows them time to finish the desired or required certification or credential while they're getting acclimated to the workplace culture? That's the thing you talked about, Lateefah, that allows them to stick around a little while, right? You invest in me, I invest in you. I'm really appreciative, Senator, of your efforts, all that you're doing, the policies to support development of youth. But we need more leadership in our communities like Lateefah's, more collaborative community organizations like DC, like Cityworks DC, that are working at this ecosystem level.
Thank you, Don. And that was such a well stated response. And I know I asked you a lot and I appreciate it, but I love your piece around like affordability, flexibility, and agility. I think we can't talk about reform without really considering those three big buckets, because they're critical to make sure people can access programs, as well as making sure they're responsive to their career needs, but also the unique skills that the individual has. And I think that's really important. I know we have a quick poll before we pass to Jim, because we're segueing a bit into politics, which is an exciting last bit of the conversation. So we're going to do a quick poll asking the audience if they believe politicians are prioritizing youth career development in their communities, or at the state level, or even at the federal level. And great. While we do that, I'm going to ask Jim his question and he'll respond, and then we'll show the results of the poll. So it'll be it'll be perfect timing. Okay, so Senator Rosapepe, after hearing about some of the programmatic reforms through Lateefah's work, as well as Don's and the stuff you're seeing in Maryland, I wanted to get your expertise of the politics of it all. Can you speak to your experience in Maryland's legislature and the process of getting these policies off the ground? Has there been bipartisan support? Has political will around this issue shifted? And what are the barriers, if there are any, that has kind of persisted in this issue area? Sure.
I've been working this very hard for about the last 8 years. And so we've done things in different years with different pieces of this. Maryland is not the United States, so I'm sure it's different in other states. But from talking to my colleagues in other states, I'm going to say some things that I don't think are too different, although people on the call will obviously have expertise in their own area. First of all, it's about the most bipartisan issue that we come across. I've never seen a division based on partisanship at all on any of these issues. That's point number one. Point number two is elected officials do not have the mindset problem that a lot of the educators do, because the politicians, they're people who work. They're people who are in the economic environment. And some of them got degrees in college, some of them didn't get degrees in college. I mean, we have lawyers and CPAs, and we have union electricians. One of my closest colleagues on these issues, I'm a Democrat, he's a Republican. He was a union steel worker. He's lived the dream of apprenticeship in manufacturing, and he's a Republican. So what I'm saying is the politics with the politicians is the easy part. What's a problem is the educational system. And I say that with love in my heart for the folks in the educational system and you all who work with the educational institutions. And it's a money problem. We give them so much money without any priority of what they were supposed to do that they do what they want to do. That's where the $2 billion is going in Maryland, to the university system, to our other four-year colleges, to our community colleges. And it's a formula. It's go do good. So they do what they want to do. And they are not market responsive. And exactly the kind of work Don is, God bless you for doing it. But it's really hard because the incentives, we put so much money into the old system, they do it the old way. And so we continually have resistance. Right now, we have an issue going on. We put money directly into career counseling to be used by our local workforce boards who have expertise in workforce, not into traditional college counselors in high schools. Traditional college counselors in high schools, they know about college. That's how they got their training. That's how they get their job experience. They thought it was great. They do not understand about truck driving or welding or IT or nursing or business services. I mean, it makes sense. But they're trying to grab the money because their approach is give us money, give us money, give us money. And we're wonderful people and it'll all come out fine. The system is fundamentally screwed up. The incentives are wrong for the folks who are the training providers. I mean, the way it ought to work, and this is why apprenticeships to me are the answer, not an answer. And it worries me when people talk about all kinds of different ways. Apprenticeship is a proven model across the world and in the United States. And it has all the elements that Don described, and Don made that point. It has visibility, it has progression, it brings people in low skilled, it's an investment by the employer, it's a commitment by the apprentice. That system has been designed and it works. And that's why, to me, the focus needs to be on getting that to scale. But that's a money issue. It's a mindset issue to some extent, but among elected officials, I did a call yesterday with leaders in the state of Indiana who are working on their own legislation along this line. The politicians get it like almost immediately, but they're dealing with special interests that want to protect the money they have. So moving the money around is the really hard part, I would say.
That's really helpful, Jim. Lateefah, I just wanted to also pass to you and just see if, building off of Jim's point, based on your time kind of on the ground as well in the county, if you faced anything else that you want to flag for the audience today.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm also looking at some of the questions in the chat here. And so, I think one of the questions kind of addresses Jim's point, which was, like, well, why aren't we working with college access organizations? Why is it one or the other? And, I typed a response to the person because for us at Cityworks DC, not everybody works this way, but we are also working with college access organizations. Just last week, we had a conversation with College Track because we have participants who are in both programs. And so we want to make sure that they are prepared to apply and enroll and persist to and through college while they are also having that career experience and getting that under their belt. I think Jim is totally accurate in that this is one of those areas that is truly bipartisan. It doesn't matter if you're on the right or on the left. Everyone wants our young people to be employed and employed in careers that will earn them family sustaining wages. Why? Because it's better for everyone, right? So it's better for the economy. It's better for our school systems. It reduces the drain on social services, et cetera. This is something that everyone can get behind. And so the question is, if the politicians are behind it, right? If the community is behind it, what else do we need to do to change the system and the structures in which our young people are existing so that they can have access to these opportunities? And so that's where it's helpful to have our politicians like Jim Rosapepe and others in the community who are willing to say, you know what, just because this is how things have been done doesn't mean that this is the way that they need to continue to be done. And how can we break down those barriers? What laws need to be changed? What regulations need to be changed? What are the unwritten policies? I've been finding a lot as I work with organizations. There's what's on paper and what's actually policy and what people say, because it's been done that way for so long. And so I think as we continue to peel back the layers and the onions to figure out what do we need politicians to make changes on, but what are some things that we can do that are simple fixes, that are things that is just it's a change in mindset, not a change in legislation. It's a change in mindset so that more of our young people can have access to all of the things that you've heard about today, whether it's apprenticeship, whether it's working on credentials, whether it's getting access to be able to earn and learn at the same time. We all have a role to play.
Could I do a footnote just on language?
Please.
We talked a lot about this in designing our program. A registered apprenticeship is an industry recognized credential. By definition, it's an industry recognized credential. You don't have to have a registered apprenticeship or a credential and a credential. It is the credential, just FYI.
No, that's a great distinction. And actually that's a good segue, because I think some of the confusion around the way we talk about these opportunities leads to some of the political stalemate at the federal level to not expand it more broadly across the country. Really quickly, I did just want to see if the poll results were ready from the audience, just to see what others think. Oh, yep. So majority of people think no. So Jim, you're doing the work we need in Maryland. We appreciate you. So really quick, last question. And I know Jim and Lateefah and Don, we've talked about this in some of our conversations, and I think it's worth bringing up, and we might all feel differently on it. So it's a great final question for the webinar to see where we land. But like I mentioned, there are still some political leaders on both sides of the aisle that are hesitant to create more expansive youth career learning ecosystems. I think they might be happy with the status quo, but don't really know what the next step is to really enhance these opportunities. I think some worry about tracking, so pushing certain students into certain paths based on their race, gender, identification, and where they're from. Where also people are worried about that these jobs and alternatives won't lead to the good jobs that they want to see people having, jobs that are high paying and have advancement opportunity. So I just want to ask our panelists, where do you land on these issues? Because they're being talked about, and it's one of the reasons I think people are still hesitant to expand more of these opportunities across the country. So what are some strategies that have helped you mitigate these concerns as you're working in your community, as you're working with other policymakers and other leaders in the space? Senator Rosapepe, I'm going to start with you first. Sure.
I've never met an elected official who had that concern. I've met lots of educators who had that concern. I've never met a politician who had that concern. So I don't think that is a political problem. Substantively, it's a bogus issue, because the high demand jobs are in healthcare is a perfect example. IT is a perfect example. There are tremendous opportunities to earn good wages at a very young age and have skills that you can use for a lifetime. It's a red herring. That, another way to put it, this is my friend, my colleague, Senator Johnny Ray Salling, the Republican I mentioned to you, who was an apprentice. He says, kids need a pathway that is paved. Sending them out of the woods to stagger around alone, which is what we do now, is not working. They need a path that we help pave. That's what registered apprenticeships are.
I love that, Jim. And thank you for that. Lateefah, I'll pass to you next.
I love that too. We need a path that we help pave. And I think, there's this, and I've tried to reiterate, I think throughout our time together today, that there's this misperception that career learning means not going to college. And it's a false dichotomy. In fact, last year, 18 of our career-wise DC youth apprentices graduated from high school. 17 out of the 18 matriculated to four-year colleges like Penn State, Catholic University, and Xavier. We believe that, youth career learning is an options multiplier. It's an options multiplier. And with programs like youth apprenticeship and career coaching, young people can broaden their ideas of what work and what school will look like, what training will look like for them, right? So for some, it will be going directly into work. For others, it's going to be going directly into college. And for still others, they're going to choose a path where they can earn and learn at the same time, right? Whether that's credentials, whether it's community college, whether it's going to a foreign institution, but they get to choose to build their career skills and their career knowledge at the same time. Now, we might all have different definitions of what success looks like, but it's for me, a mom of 2 Black boys. Success is moving out of my house, paying your own bills, and being able to comfortably take care of your family if you choose to have one. How they get there, that's up to them. But it's our jobs, as Jim said, as educators, as politicians, as community members, to provide them with the knowledge and the options, that paved road that Jim was talking about, for them to be able to choose what their path is to success.
Lateefah, I love that. And I really appreciate you bringing in some of your personal context and how you feel as a parent to the conversation. Don, big finale, passing it to you.
Sure, thanks. Great responses, appreciate it. I wish my 2 kids were here to hear your response there, Lateefah. So yeah, the narrative is incorrect, right? And too many people somehow are hanging on to a real false narrative here. Here's the reality for youth. They're very likely to live to 100 years old, right? This is the reality, right? If you look at, that's what happens. Each generation lives a little bit longer than the previous one. So what does that mean, right? You're not retiring at 65, right? You might, if you're lucky, you will, but you're working longer, right? So when we think about, when we're having this conversation, we shouldn't be having it with, some type of finality in mind, right? We have to build people who are learners, who are adaptable, right? Who can take those skills that Senator talked about. You develop those in healthcare. By the way, those are also useful in another sector, right? But we're stuck in this idea that if you go into a sector, that's where you will be, right? And that is in itself limiting to think that way, right? The world in which we're working right now, you could go work at a healthcare facility and there's hospitality in there, there's IT in there, there's finance in there, it's all covered in there, right? So what we need to focus on is mobility, right? And adaptability for learners. And the Federal Reserve down in Philadelphia did some fantastic work during COVID around this occupational mobility explorer. And I'll send the link to you, Taylor, and you can put it in chat for people. And I think this is a great example of, you had a lot of people leave retail and hospitality, but a lot of the skills there were actually very valuable in other industries entirely that they would never think to even apply to jobs in those industries, right? So we have to change that narrative. People have to recognize that the skills you're building, you will continue to build more. You will need to continue to build and develop skills so that you could be agile, so that it could be mobile. So you're going to live a much longer life, much longer than I'm going to be living. So that's what I want to close on.
Thank you all so much. You all had such amazing closing remarks, and I think really helped us understand how we can mitigate some of the pushback on expanding these opportunities based on not only the mindset shifts and the reason for this, but the data that we have to date. I also want to acknowledge we weren't able to get to every single question in the chat. So audience members, please feel free. We're going to send a follow-up email with this recorded, and please feel free to reach out to myself, someone else at PPI, or any of our hopefully wonderful speakers would be willing to talk to you more. There was one great question on how K-12 can expand these opportunities in their communities. And so we definitely have some experts on the line who can help think about partnerships and ways to do that. So I just want to thank you all again for being here, and definitely reach out to us all. And again, thank our wonderful speakers for such a great conversation and all the work you're doing to push these efforts forward and help our young people be successful.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.